Hello everyone, we're going to be going over radical equations today. This is lesson 1.4. So starting off, we have the cubed root of x cubed. So every operation has an inverse operation. And the inverse is the opposite of whatever that is. So the inverse operation to addition is subtraction. The inverse operation of multiplication is division. Subtraction's addition, division's multiplication. So these are inverse operations here. If I have a cubed root and then I cube it, that is just going to be x. If I have the square root of x and then I square this, it's just going to be x. Okay? Okay. So the cubed root cubed is whatever is inside the radical. Next question. Let's get us a new one. But here we have the square root, because if there is not a number on the ledge of a radical, then it's just squared. So the opposite of a square root is to square it. So we're going to square both sides of this equation. When I square this square root, it just makes it 3x subtract 8, because inverse operations. 7 squared, be sure you're squaring and not multiplying by 2. So 7 times 7 is 49, and then we'll just use our inverse operations to solve for x. So get x alone, so we're going to add 8. And that makes this 0, so I'll have 3x equals 49 plus 8 is 57. Then we'll divide by 3, because the opposite of multiplication is division. That's 1. So I have x equals 5 divided by 3 is 1. 3 goes into 27 9 times. So x equals 19. There's only 10 questions on this, so if y'all need more help, let me know. This problem right here is a trick question. So I'll rewrite it so you can see it. 8t plus 9 equals negative 9. So our last lesson was 1.3, and it was over complex numbers. In that lesson, we learned that if you take the square root of a negative, it becomes an I, an imaginary number, because when you square anything, because the opposite of a square root is a square, if I square a negative, if I have negative 5 times negative 5, we get positive 25. So there's no way we would have a negative come out from under a square root, because the inverse of that is not true. I say all this to say right here, isn't possible. If I take the square root of something, I get an I, not a negative. So this one is empty set. If that doesn't make sense, let me know. And that also, looking at this problem, it only happens when it is positive numbers. Because if I cubed something, like if I had, let me get rid of this real quick. If I had negative 1 times negative 1 times negative 1, this is a tangent that we're going on. But a negative times a negative is a positive 1 times negative 1 would equal negative 1. So this one's possible. We are going to have an answer on this problem. So let's go ahead and work this out. So we're going to have the 9th root of x squared plus 2x equals negative 1. So the first thing we do is get rid of our radical. So the opposite of a 9th root would be to raise that to the 9th power. So we're going to raise both sides to the 9th power. So this is going to be x squared plus 2x equals 1 times 1 times 1 is, it's still going to be 1. And since it's odd, it's going to be negative 1. Then we're going to take our negative 1 and move it to this side. So I'm going to have x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 0. I want to erase that. Okay, oh, it's a plus sign. Get back in there. Okay, so numbers that multiply to get 1, that add to get 2 is going to be 1 and 1. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. So I'd have x plus 1, because we're breaking this into factors. So then when we solve it, we'd have, we're going to write this. We'd have x plus 1 equals 0. And since they're both x plus 1s, I'm just going to solve one of them. And I'd subtract 1. This is 0, so x equals -1. I need to get a wireless keyboard. I think that, or maybe put a keyboard right here. Okay, question 5. So we have the square root of 15 subtract 2x equals x. Same thing, since there's not a number on the ledge, this is a square root. The opposite of a square root is a square. So we square both sides. When I square the square root, it drops, and I still have x squared. So since I have an x squared, I'm going to keep my x squared positive, so I'm going to move everything to this side and set it equal to 0, because whenever I have x squared, I have to set it equal to 0 to factor it and find the answer. So I'm going to add 2x, because that's the opposite of subtraction. And I'm going to subtract 15, and I'm going to rewrite this. So I'm going to rewrite it right here. Everything's 0 on this side. So I'm going to have x squared plus 2x subtract 15 equals 0. So I'm looking for factors of 15 that subtract to get 2. So numbers that multiply to get 15 but subtract to get 2. So it's going to be 3 and 5, and I'm going to have x at the beginning of both of these, and I'll have 5 and 3. Now since I need a positive 2, I'm going to have plus 5 minus 3, because that equals positive 2, equals 0. Then we'll go ahead and do the opposite of this. I do believe we're going to check these, because remember, I'm getting ahead. So we're going to go ahead and have, I'm going to erase this part real quick, so we have room to do this. So I'm going to have x plus 5 equals 0, and I have x minus 3 equals 0. So when I subtract this 5, I'd have x equals -5. When I add this 3, we're going to have x equals 3. The problem with both of these solutions is that they want a real solution. We just went over this in the last question. If I put -5 in here, I'm going to have the radical 15 minus 2x equals -5. And since it's a square root, there is no way that's possible, because if we take the square root of a negative, we get a I, not a -5. So this one is not possible. So we may start checking these. This 3 here, if I put in 3, I have 15 subtract 2x. So 2 times 3 is 6. 15 subtract 6 is 9. Square root of 9 is 3. So that one works. If we put the -5 in, we'd have 15 subtract 2 times -5, so it'd be 15 plus 10, which would be 25, but the square root of 25 is positive 5, not -5. If you have a negative and it's not to the third power or any odd power, it can't be an answer, because it would be that imaginary number I. I hope that didn't just confuse y'all more. If it did, let me know. Send me an email. and I'll try and improve. Okay, this one's more work. I wish I had more board. But here we go. So I'm just going to write it right here beside it. X squared subtract x subtract 4 equals x plus 5. It wasn't in parentheses, and I got ahead of myself and did that. But when we square this to get rid of our square root, we have to square all of this as a whole. So you can't just do x squared plus 25. It has to be x plus 5 squared. So this side, we'll just go ahead and rewrite it. X squared subtract x subtract 4 equals, now over here I'm going to have x plus 5 times x plus 5. Because when we square something, it's that twice. So when we go to multiply this, we have x times x to get our x squared, then x times 5. This middle part's what people forget, because x squared plus 25 is wrong. You have to do the 5 times x and then 5 times 5. So if you just square the outside, you lose this middle part. Let's rewrite the problem. X squared subtract x subtract 4 equals x squared plus 10x, because we have 5x plus 5x plus 25. Now then we're going to combine like terms. So if I go to combine my x squareds, since they're both positive, it's going to be 0 on both sides. So then I'm looking at my normal x's. I have a -1 and a positive 10. So I'm going to add this 1x to my 10. So now then my x's are on this side. So I'm going to move my 25 over here. That's 0. So I have 25 and -4. So I have -29. And 10 plus 1 is 11x. We divide by 11. So I have x equals -29 over 11. We should check this. 29 over 11 is going to be, it's not quite -3. So this is still going to be positive over here. So it very well should work. If I have my calculator, I just type it in. Let's see what happens. Okay, I would make a little star when you're doing this, or if you're doing it right now, know that it has an ugly answer. I feel like ugly answers always throw people off because nobody wants an ugly answer. I don't like the ugly answers either, so. But. Okay, this problem right here, before you can square the sides, you need to have just the radical on it. You could technically do it, but then remember where we had to do x times x, then x times 5, and 5 times x, and 5 times 5. You'd have to do that with this. You don't want to do that. So we're going to subtract this 3 that's not under the radical and move it over here with our x. So I'm going to have square root of 3x subtract 5 equals x subtract 3. So when I go to square this to get rid of the radical, we have to square this side as well. So here we're going to have 3x subtract 5 equals, and then it's going to be multiplying by x minus 3, because whenever it's in parentheses, it's not just x squared plus 9, because the -3 times -3. It's x minus 3 times x minus 3. So x times x is x squared. X times -3 is subtract 3x. -3 times x is subtract 3x. -3 times a -3 is a positive 9. That's ugly right there. 3x subtract 5 equals x squared. We combine our 3x's right here, so -3 and -3 is -6x plus 9. Now I'm going to bring everything to the side that x squared is on. The previous problem we had 2x squares, so we had to combine them. And when we did, it made it 0. They canceled each other out. Here we're going to have to move everything to the same side so that our equation is equal to 0 so that we can factor. So we have x squared minus 9x plus 14 equals 0. And I'm going to bring that over here and work with it. So I have x squared subtract 9x plus 14 equals 0. So numbers that multiply, I feel like I'm going really fast. I'm going to take a breath real quick. Now that we've got it to our quadratic equation, we're going to take the numbers that multiply to get 14 and add to get 7. So 7 and 2, 7 times 2 is 14. 7 plus 2 equals 9. Whenever it's a plus sign, remember they both have this first sign, so I'm going to have x subtract 7 and x subtract 2 equals 0, because negative 7 and negative 2 equal negative 9, but negative times that negative gives us that positive 14. This set we're going to have to check. So we're going to have x minus 7 equals 0 and x minus 2 equals 0. So right here we have x equals 7. I don't like it right there. X equals 2. Okay. Now then I'm going to erase this so that we can check our problem. So I'm going to have 3 plus, we're going to do each of these 3 times 7 minus 5. And we want this to equal 7. So I put 7 in for x in our original equation to make sure that both of these equations work with our solutions. Both of our solutions work. So 3 times 7 is going to be 21 subtract 5. Then I'm going to have 3 plus 21 subtract 5. 21 subtract 5 is 16. So we have 3 plus the square root of 16. The square root of 16 is 4. Does that equal 7? Because we are checking this. Since it does, check. 7 is a solution. Then we're going to have our 3 plus the square root of 3 times 2. It's minus 5. I don't know where the actual eraser is. 3 times 2 minus 5 equals, and this is the other problem, equals 2, because we put 2 in for our x in this equation. So we have 3 plus 3 times 2 is 6, subtract 5 equals 2. 6 subtract 5 is 1, so I'd have 3 plus the square root of 1 equals 2. The square root of 1 is 1, so 3 plus 1 equals 2. No. So this one is not an answer. So the only answer is the 7. Trash. I'd make a little note on 7 that only one of them works. Oh, this problem right here, it's just another way to write a radical. So this raised to the 1/2 power is actually the exact same as if it was this. So whichever way you want to work it is fine, because if I say I'm squaring here, your exponent rules, you'd multiply them. So 2 times 1/2 makes this 1. And so either way, when we square these, it does the exact same thing. This is supposed to be 1. So when I square this square root, we end up with 2x plus 8 equals 2 squared is 4. My 8 looked funky, I couldn't. Equals 4. And then we solve our equation. So we're going to subtract our 8. So I have 2x equals 4 subtract 8 is negative 4. Divide by 2, so we get x equals negative 2. We'll check this. So we have 2 times negative 2 is negative 4, plus 8 is 4, and then the square root of 4 is 2. So negative 2 is the answer. The only time to be worried that you got a negative as a solution is if it equals x. I feel like I should tell y'all that right now. If it equals an x, that's when we need to be checking our solutions. But if you check them every time, it's not going to hurt you. Okay, this one's to the 1/3, so this is the same as a cubed root. 5x plus 7, and all of this is raised to the 1/3 power, which is the exact same as a cubed root. So the opposite of taking a cubed root would be to raise this to the 3rd power. So when I do 3 times 1/3, I don't need to. This is all going to be 1, so I have 5x plus 7, and then remember 3 to the 3rd power is not 3 times 3. This is 3 times 3 times 3. So 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27. And then we'll solve for x, so we would subtract 7. And then I would have 5x equals 20. And we would divide by 5. So x equals 4. If we did that over here, 5 times 4 is 20, plus 7 is 27, and then the 3rd root, cubed root, is 3. I didn't click it. 4. Last one in this problem set. I kind of feel like I went really fast, but if y'all have questions, email me. If I don't respond right away, don't hesitate to just get on there and, did you see this? Because there's a good chance I got caught chasing kids. So the opposite of a square root, because this 1/2 is the same as a square root, would be to square it. So we're going to square both sides. Over here, this would be 1, so we have x squared. Subtract 5 equals 2 squared. 2 times 2 is 4. And then since there is a squared here, we're going to move our 4 to this side. So I'm going to subtract 4. So we have x squared subtract 9 equals 0. Here, this is the difference of 2 squares. So numbers that multiply to get 9 and subtract to get 0. So we'd have 3 times 3 is 9. 3 subtract 3 is 0. So when we do this one, we're going to have, I'm going to write it right here. We'd have x subtract 3 and x plus 3 equals 0. Because our factors subtract, so a negative 3 plus 3 is 0. So when we work this out, we would have x equals 3 and x equals negative 3. We can check this. So 3 squared is 9. Subtract 5 is 4. Square root of 4 is 2. Negative 3 squared, that'd be negative 3 times negative 3, which is positive 9. Subtract 5 is 4. Square root of 4 is 2. So there's 2 answers to this. 3 and negative 3. That's all on this lesson. If y'all need any more help, let me know, and we'll get it figured out. Thanks.